This is Bitcoin zoomed out on the weekly chart. We are just post 2024 Bitcoin halving, getting very close to this environment where historically Bitcoin and crypto sees just an awesome bull run, a parabolic bull run. That's what happened every time on this chart. But the difference is right now we are at the confluence of that happening with a recession. And this is something that has not happened. And so the question is, how do we approach crypto cycle right now? How do we approach the Bitcoin charts? And you can just see a Bitcoin chart zoomed in. We're getting close to this lower trend line, potentially breaking the lower trend line. It's looking so bearish. Everything's looking terrible. There's all this recession talk. How do we approach these charts? So in this video, I'm going to definitely actually do some short-term technical analysis as it relates to this wedge, some just interesting data that I think we should track as Bitcoin's approaching this lower trend line. But I also just want to discuss zoomed out, and this applies to the total crypto market cap chart, the Bitcoin chart, doesn't matter, but zoomed out. How can we possibly navigate with all of this recession stuff that's happening right now? So please hit the subscribe, hit the like. Let's jump into it. It might be of no surprise if you've been watching my videos. I'm just bullish, everybody. I'm bullish. And this is to say we could fall. We could keep falling for even the months ahead. But let's discuss that. What could that possibly look like? I don't mean to re-echo myself, but it's so foundational for all of the charts that I keep covering to just mention this, especially if it's for somebody that hasn't seen my videos. But these very simple data points I'm applying to this cycle as it relates to crypto, looking at recessions. And by the way, we're talking recession because you just go online, we're in a recession. You're going to, especially now, we're going to start seeing finally these headlines. We're in a recession. Fed official says the odds of a recession might be rising. That was 4 hours ago. That was today. But you can just see we're either about to get into a recession according to some, or we're already in a recession according to some. So if that's the case, we need to take recession data, historical recession data, not my opinion or anybody's opinion, but just what happened, and we have to put it on the charts. I don't see any other way to navigate. And even that's not a guarantee. But at recessions dating back to 1957, the S&P on average, the S&P 500 on average bottoms 3 months after a recession begins. This is so important to me because obviously, look at S&P 500 weekly chart. It's falling. It's not looking great. This is going to translate on the Bitcoin chart. It's not going to look great for Bitcoin if it falls. But if we've entered a recession, just say, and maybe it's this week, we can just say, historically looking back, they're going to be like, man, that was right when it started. Historically, 3 months after it starts is the bottom. So that takes us into December. This is kind of the starting point of my analysis for this cycle. And then I take that and I overlay it onto the Bitcoin charts. And then we have this one too. 86% of the time, S&P 500 index posted positive returns 12 months after the initial rate cut. This is in relation to rate cuts that we're about to get. So we get the rate cuts, we get into a recession, and it is very possible that the markets bottom 3 months after, and then 12 months after, there's actually positive returns. This chart can see a dip. This is S&P 500. It can see a dip, and I don't know exactly what it would look like in the coming months if it happens. Maybe we analyze for the 50-week moving average as a first support, and then we analyze for the 200-week moving average as the next support. We go back here, and I thought it interesting in September 2018 or so, kind of just the technical move that happened there. Lasted not 3 months, but close to 3 months, right? So some type of move like this could be very much in play for markets, right? And there's so many speculative moves that are in play, but I'm just saying if we get something like that, it could be more short-lived than many people are anticipating. And how that translates on the Bitcoin charts and the Bitcoin cycles, and then after I mention this point, we're going to dive into the short-term price action of Bitcoin and crypto. But how that translates, if it's a shorter-lived just reaction to the recession on the charts, traditional markets, crypto, this means, at least for me, that even if we fall further, and I'm going to keep saying this, I'm going to say it a lot, we fall further, and we'll look at what this could look like in the short-term analysis, but we could just be putting in a higher low before continuing on. And if something like this chart, if Bitcoin falls in the 40s, the 30s, and crypto's falling and it's looking terrible, but it bounces, right? After months. And if historical data repeats because of that recession data that we have, and markets do bottom, and we actually can continue into this bull cycle as we've already been anticipating. So that is so still in play. And if you just look at this chart, it almost makes sense, right? So what does that look like though, right? You know, what should we be watching even in the short term? And this is what I like to do. This is why I like to do technical analysis, is because even when we have crazy big things happening like this, I mean, this recession talk is I think this is like a pretty much a big first as far as my content covering crypto for almost 7 years on this YouTube channel. This is a big first, the intersection of a recession like this and crypto cycles. But putting it all aside is what I like to do. And I just like to just track the charts, follow the charts, and watch price. Even as these events unfold and they may trigger certain things happening, I just like to stick to the charts. It helps me put emotions aside. And if you zoom out on a Bitcoin chart, you zoom out on a total crypto market cap chart, you 100% understand what I'm talking about there, right? This is total crypto market cap chart. You zoom out. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it does fall. Maybe we just start falling because all the recession stuff, and it's the first cycle where right now at this purple line, this is supposed to be altcoin season finally exploding. You look at it last cycle. Well, maybe this cycle is going to be a first, and we have to live through it. It's putting in a higher low, and you see crypto as a total crypto market cap falling to like just above $1 trillion. It's looking terrible, and then we're bouncing. Maybe it's a first. We have to accept that that's possible, but it all starts on the zoomed in. So we do have this, and this is where we're going to talk about kind of the shorter term price analysis. We obviously can see Bitcoin on this chart really did not even get close to breaking above the 20, the 50, the 200, these areas we really were watching for it to break above and start flipping this trend around. And we're actually just approaching to the downside. But check it out, everybody. Put aside the daily headlines. Look at this clip. This was from 11 days ago. Check it out. What if we break below the symmetrical triangle and things get really bad, and we're actually hitting this lower trend line of the blue falling wedge, falling, channel? What if it gets so bad and we're there? That's always the question. And here we're here. And it's okay. It's a pattern. This is what happens in patterns. These are pattern setups. And I will say, even if Bitcoin breaks the lower trend line, that's what the patterns are for. Obviously, we want to see it break to the upside, out of the upside of the pattern. But right now, markets are approaching the lower trend line, similar to how they were doing it back here. And it's the same exact thing on the total crypto market cap chart, right? We're approaching that lower trend line. So it doesn't matter if you hold Bitcoin or altcoins. We're in that. That's the environment that we're in. So a couple things, though. I wanted to mention, this is Balkowski on the pattern site. I want to go over a couple of things as it relates to the descending broadening wedge, because he does all of these patterns. He breaks them down. I've learned so much, and I just sometimes like to just bring up this chart, or his website, I should say, and just kind of go over it. So one thing I wanted to point out in terms of descending broadening wedges, which is what we're in, throwback pullback rate, 62, 64%. I believe it's obviously over 50%. And the reason I'm bringing that up is a pullback rate of 64% based on his data. A pullback is this. And anytime we get to trend lines, I'm always anticipating potential break to the downside and a pullback. That's a pullback. A break to the upside is a throwback, right? But I'm always anticipating those, because in this case, he's saying 64% of the time we get a pullback. So my question is, if we break to the downside, are we pulling back? That's always my first question. And the reason why that's a question is because, yes, we have a target to the downside. We're looking at like the lower 40s. That's in play right now. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But just because we break to the downside doesn't mean that's immediately going to happen. We might get the pullback. And he goes over a bunch of different data on these slides. You can just see, for instance, this one. And this is really the one I wanted to cover. This is just a kind of a setup that he tracked. This is a broadening wedge that you can see on the screen. It's not Bitcoin, But this chart shows an example of a busted or soon to be busted descending broadening wedge. Price breaks out downward, drops some, but not much before reversing and staging an upward breakout. This is something that I think it's just a good idea to always watch for. Busted patterns are like my favorite to track because especially when it's a busted pattern, not to the upside, but it's to the downside, because this could be a huge bear trap for people, right? For shorts. We break to the downside. People start, shorting it. There's the indicator. And then we flip back to the upside. There's a powerful move to the upside. That's something I'd be watching for and anticipating for. Now, if we go back to this, there was another slide that I wanted to talk about, and it was this one. A downward retrace is an uptrend. In an uptrend, works well when the uptrend resumes. So you can see this uptrend happening on his chart, and then we have this retrace that's forming this wedge that is right here on the screen. If you look at, you can even just go to the total crypto market cap. This is kind of what has been happening. We have this uptrend, and we have a kind of this retrace happening, which is the wedge. I think there is still, even with all of the negativity, the negative sentiment, the high fear, because we are in high fear right now. Actually, let's go refresh that. We're at 29 last time. Right now, we're at 22. We're at 22, extreme fear. There is a case, everybody. And I'm not sitting here saying this is a prediction, but there's a case where this Bitcoin chart, maybe we fall, we wick down through the lower trend line, but there's a case where it can bounce, right? And there's a case where maybe we fall to through the trend line. This turns into a busted pattern, and then we do continue to the upside, right? Kind of how he has this as on his chart. But again, that's some hopium. That's some bullish hopium as we discuss the reality of what's happening here, and that is Bitcoin is breaking the lower trend line. But again, putting aside everything, that is what this is. The purpose of this is to say, you know what? This is just a setup, a pattern setup in terms of Bitcoin. I've already discussed at the beginning of the video how downtrend, if we're going to see a downtrend, even in the coming months, could play out to be the setup for an epic bull market. Once markets bounce and react, they start turning those printers on after the recession capitulation, and I think it might be game on. And so I'm trying to sit here patiently and not just look at short-term price movements, because it wasn't even long ago where we were getting just extreme downside and fear entering the market. This was back in August, beginning of August, and then we bounced, and everybody's just like, man, that was it. That was it. Everybody was getting all bearish right back there, but look at us bouncing. And then look, we're here again. This is the story of crypto, whether there's recession talk or not. So we're still on track in my view. You can even notice, even if we fall, even if this chart continues to fall, we're on track. I should bring up the RSI, the momentum oscillators. I did want to mention there's definitely bullish divergence on this chart. You can just see right now this daily candle we're still 3 hours from it closing, but you can just see how it's lower than this previous swing low. So we have kind of this lower trend line forming on price, higher trend line on RSI, momentum oscillator. And the last time we got something like that, guess what happened? We saw a really nice move to the upside, the upper trend line. I do hesitate because this is too obvious, right? Just to say, man, look at this. This almost looks even better, bullish divergence. We can't get overly confident that we're going to bounce here to the upside, but it is certainly in play. But I would be very cautious at this moment, because right now we've seen on this lower trend line pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're approaching a 6th touch to the lower trend line, and you can just see almost half a year of falling. There could be some capitulation, and there's a target to the downside. So I'm trying to bring in macro context. I'm trying to bring in historical context going back to the 50s as it relates to the recession. And I'm just trying to look at the short-term charts realistically. And we just have to stand here and just anticipate everything. That's all we can do. And just ask ourselves, this is a point of analysis for me. Am I cool with that? Am I prepared for either scenario? Meaning, am I prepared for the capitulation to downside? am I prepared for a bounce to the upside? That's the question. This is not a game of prediction, everybody. That's a dangerous game to play. But it's a game of anticipation and just being ready for all scenarios. So these are my thoughts today. Let me know your thoughts, how you're doing out there, everybody. I appreciate you cruising through. We'll continue watching, monitoring what's going on with crypto markets. Hit the subscribe, hit the like. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.